Hello, patriots and scholars for life. Some good questions for the game of truth are: what is your most embarrassing memory? What is the worst gift you have ever received? Or what is the worst rumor you have ever participated in? Usually the game of truth is combined with dares, making it truth or dare. Do you dare finding out the truth? Taking on COVID-19, South Africa goes after cigarettes and booze too, is the title of the New York Times article on May the 8th, 2020. Lockdown against the pandemic. South African officials banned cigarettes and alcohol sales. It has gone as well as you might expect. The dealer had a stash. The young woman wasn't getting through the door without an introduction. That's where her friend, already a trusted customer, come in. And even then, there were complications. The woman wanted Stuyvesant. The dealer had Courtly. But in South Africa, where the sale of cigarettes is newly illegal, quibblers risk nicotine fits. She took the Courtly and hightailed it out there. I feel like I'm buying cocaine, said the woman, 29, who asked not to be named for fear of being fined or arrested. In late March, in the midst of COVID-19 virus outbreak, the South African government banned the sale of tobacco and alcohol as part of a broad lockdown, one of the most strict anyway. But even as the government has begun rolling back the lockdown, the ban remains in effect. Perhaps not surprisingly, an underground market in both cigarettes and alcohol quickly sprung up. That's where the interest of the whole ban got me. And I digged a little bit on some research and old articles to see what our history is like with this tobacco banning. Now, as a South African, I know that we've got a long history with the illicit tobacco trade in Africa, so there must be definitely more to the story than just it's for health benefits, as they want us to believe. It would seem to be a general truth that nothing is as straightforward as it at first seems. So this is what I found. An article for 26 November 2014 from Eyewitness News, and it is titled "Illegal Cigarette Trade Costing Taxpayer 5 billion a Year." Johannesburg. The illegal cigarette trade has come under the spotlight at a conference in Cape Town attended by authorities including the Hawks Police Unit, Europol, and the Tobacco Institute of South Africa, also known as TISA. Speaking to Radio 702 on the 26th of November, TISA Chief Executive Francois van der Merwe said, unless South Africans pull together and stub out the illegal cigarette trade, South Africa won't be a preferred destination for investors. TISA says 31% of 30 billion cigarettes smoked in South Africa annually are illegal, costing the government around 5 billion a year in tax revenue. So this article is from ENCA and it's dated Tuesday 22nd of November 2016. SARS Wars. Fresh controversy hits Moyane's new investigative unit. Johannesburg, 7th of November 2016. Racism in the workplace can cost you your job. On Tuesday, South Africa's highest court overturned a Labour court ruling which orders SARS to reinstate a racist employee who used the K word twice. While SARS had issued a statement that its views in a serious light claims that a top official, Wigan Mundy, appointed to Head Commissioner Tom Moyane's new SARS investigative unit, ostensibly to probe the tobacco industry, has links to the criminal underground. The tax collector says it is at present unaware of any illegal or unauthorized activities by Mundi. Meanwhile, a tobacco war is brewing as British American Tobacco South Africa competitor Carney Linux has lodged a criminal complaint against the multinational's local and overseas directors, as well as several others named in a recent massive Twitter data leak suggesting widespread bribery, corruption and espionage by the tobacco giant. The fallout at SARS that has been destructively playing itself out in the public realm for at least 3 years now, shattering the careers of several committed civil servants and resulting in the ultimate hounding of Financial Minister Pravin Gordhan by the Hawks, began with an attack on SARS by the tobacco industry. The SARS story, the original allegations of a ruse unit, the purging of the top executive including Deputy Commissioner Ivan Pillay, is a vital piece of the much greater state capture mosaic. The country's revenue collection service is crucially important for South Africa, for without a scrupulous and vigilant SARS, the state's coffers cannot be adequately replenished. This is from Atlantic Council's website. The article is dated March 2019 and it's done by Simon Rudland. The illicit tobacco trade in Zimbabwe and South Africa, impacts and solutions. This study was conducted to explore how the illicit trade in illicit goods supports organized crime, corruption and erodes state structures. The illicit tobacco trade in Southern Africa occupies a prominent place in Southern Africa's politics due to its prominent role in the state capture scandal that categorized politics in South Africa between 2013 and 2018. Indeed, the illicit tobacco trade occupies a prominent place in public debates in South Africa, both about crimes that may have been committed in the last 5 years and about how the current administration responds to the illicit economy right now. Conflict over and convert, violent and non-violent, over who makes the most money from illicit tobacco, who controls it, and how the state responds to it, is a major feature of South Africa's and to a lesser extent Zimbabwe's political economy. This conflict now takes place in the midst of huge political transition within the ruling parties of both countries. Daily Maverick, 30th of July 2019. Tobacco Wars, Rolex and the Project Robin by Johann Laurinburg. Tobacco War is a tale of a few good men and women who dare to try to hold to account $1 billion international industry riff with espionage, private spy networks, tax evasion, collusion and corruption, ultimately at great cost to themselves and South Africa. In this extract, the lid is lifted on Rolex and Project Robin. Nothing better demonstrates how government officials were captured and manipulated by some within the cigarette industry than the case of Rolex and what was known as Project Robin. In 2011, a text exchange took place between Belinda Walter and her tobacco task team handler, Ferdi Freyer. Walter appeared a bit miffed about the payment someone had received after a certain deal. Biz News, 6th of August 2019, and the article is African King of the Cheapy Siggy, Extract from Tobacco Wars by Linda van Tilburg. Johann Laurinburg describes many characters as he calls them in his book Tobacco Wars. He told Alec Hogg in an interview there were no angels in the tobacco industry, only bag snatchers, smugglers and bank robbers. And although many can be described as sailing close to the wind or just downright tax cheats, Van Laurinburg appears to have a grudging respect for some of them. One of them is Tribert Eyewitness. He is a Rwandan who popped up in many other African countries, including Burundi and South Africa, and is described by Johann as one of the pioneers of the value brand or cheapy cigarette that are sold in South Africa. He managed to build up a £200 million fortune, but his illegal activities caught up with him in Burundi and the UK and South Africa. Eyewitness business ventures and adventures, which includes brushes with war and rebels, sounds like a Hollywood script, and it would not be surprising if it is snatched up by some movie director. If a Somalian pirate can find himself in a script that attracts Tom Hanks, Captain Phillips, anything is possible. Tobacco Wars, Hits, Threats and Secret Ops Behind the Simon Rudland Attempted Hit, by Mandy Wiener, a special reporter for News 24, 2019, August 17th. Gold Leaf Tobacco Corporation's Simon Rudland, who survived an assassination attempt this week, says he 100% believes one of his competitors was behind the attempted hit. When Rutland pulled in his black Porsche Boxer into the driveway of the Fair Trade Independent Tobacco Association, also known as FITA, offices in Oakland's Johannesburg on Wednesday morning, he was ambushed by a gunman who fired 9 shots at him. The shooter and an accomplice had been waiting in a white VW Golf in a street adjacent to FITA's offices. 3 bullets struck the cigarette baron, 2 in his back and 1 in his neck, after it went through the headrest, missing his spine by 1 millimeter. Mail and Guardian. What did the former SARS official know about Big Tobacco's dodgy deals? 13 September 2019. State capture was a godsend for tobacco dealers, writes former SARS official Johann Laurinburg in his latest book, which may shed new light on one of the industry's most popular campaigns. In 2018, Becky Cesar and Mail and Guardian published a piece questioning the tactics of the hashtag #TakeBackTheTax campaign and the data on which it was based, produced by an industry-funded Ipsos study. Industry body, the Tobacco Institute of South Africa, also known as TISA, maintained that the campaign was not linked in any way to the Tobacco Control Bill introduced earlier that year. In his new book, Tobacco Wars, Inside the Spy Games and Dirty Tricks of Southern Africa's Cigarette Trade, former South African Revenue Services (SARS) employee Johann Laurinburg sheds new light on the tobacco industry's tactics. He describes how prior to #TakeBackTheTax launch, traditional big tobacco companies planned a coordinated campaign to ensure that the illicit tobacco trade problem received the highest priority from cabinet and government as a whole before any new or controversial legislation was to be considered.
I would imagine, as people who are opposed to tobacco anyway, why would you want to enter a debate on illicit tobacco trade?
So the illicit tobacco trade is really important when we're looking at the issue of consumption and health. You mentioned the figure of 7 billion that is being lost, from the South African taxpayer. And that is really important to all of us because we need that 7 billion in the fiscus, but also because it's only the initial cost to tobacco consumption. The second cost all of us are paying for. When people become ill and go to our public health system, our taxes are again subsidizing their health care, whereas the profits are going to the tobacco industry. So it's also very interesting to us when the tobacco industry talks about how big the illicit trade in tobacco is. And why it's interesting to us is because pre-2014 SARS was monitoring the illicit trade in tobacco. And what they found is that at several of the manufacturers, tobacco manufacturers in South Africa, there was a legitimate tobacco production during the day that SARS was informed about, and then an illicit tobacco production at the same factory that SARS was not informed about. So when we hear from the tobacco industry, oh, they're so concerned about the illicit trade, one has to take that with a pinch of salt. If we take in, existing information in the public domain about the involvement of some in the tobacco industry in the illicit trade.
So, opposed as you might be to smoking, it doesn't bother you that inadvertently you may just be assisting the industry to actually make more money and to, make.
So we are not assisting the industry because what is happening is that the agencies that are supposed to be monitoring, and that would be SARS themselves, it would be the police, it would be the National Prosecuting Authority, the justice system.
So listening to these articles and going through them, it's definitely shouting at me that there's more to this CV lockdown cigarette ban than meets the eye, and not this nonsense they want us to believe for health risks and whatever. Hopefully I've tickled your interest, and we would like to hear from you what your opinion is. So there are links down in the description, so if you want to read these articles for yourself, you're welcome to, but please leave a like and give us your opinion. Thanks. Bye.